Good evening and welcome to the Sex, Politics, and Religion Hour, SPAR with Jamila. I'm your host, Jamila Bey, and I'm so delighted that you are joining me right now. This is a very special show. It's December, and everything is a very special thing in December. So I have reached out to a number of my friends, and they're on the line, but before I introduce them, I want to pose a question to you. If you are a prosecutor, say, and you realize that you no longer believe you are being effective, your role in the criminal justice system isn't one that any longer you are happy with, that you're proud of, you feel like you need to make a change, do you lose your family when you come out and say that? If you're a doctor and you say, I am tired of being a doctor, I'm sick of sick people, I'm going to go and follow my heart and my passion, do you lose everything you've built? If you're a reverend and you say that, if you're a minister and you no longer believe the spiritual food you're feeding to your flock, there's a lot at stake. There's a lot to lose. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking with some people today who can tell us a little bit more about that. I want to introduce, first of all, we're going to do this in the order of people I've met, so I'm saving one for last. Teresa MacBain, she is the Public Relations Director of American Atheists, and I want to welcome you, Teresa.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here with you.
Now, just a quick little bio on you. What was your role in the church? What was your denomination? And when did you come out as having left?
I was a senior pastor in a United Methodist Church, which encompasses everything that the pastors do, life cycle events, burials, funerals, etc., the entire scope of pastoring. And I came out actually March 26th of this year at the American Atheists National Convention in Bethesda, Maryland.
Which I attended.
I remember you.
It was a wonderful event. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Now, the next person I met was Jeff Satterwhite. He is a doctoral candidate researching the religious right and their views on abortion and same-sex marriage. Jeff, thank you so much for being with me today.
It's a pleasure, Jamila. Thanks.
Okay, give me that 30-second synopsis. What was your role in the church, and when did you come out as having left?
I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and I served at churches in Austin and Houston, mega churches in the Baptist tradition. Went from Southern Baptist to a moderate Baptist to a liberal Baptist, and then I got out of ministry about 4 years ago. Became an atheist about 3 years ago, and so kind of saw the whole gamut of the Baptist tradition in America. So
got liberal and liberal and liberaler until you just got out. I love that story. Thank you. Now, the friend on the line that I have not met yet, but we are going to get together because this is my separated at birth twin, Dr. Annalise Fonza, author, speaker, and all-around super debater. I've seen some takedowns from some folks that Dr. Fonza has done on Facebook that reminds me of the Hitch Lap of the great Christopher Hitchens. So I give that praise, and it sounds really high and laudatory, but don't be on the wrong side of fact if Dr. Fonza is anywhere nearby. Thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you, Jamila. It's a pleasure.
All right. Tell us where you came from, and we know where you are now, but when did you come out?
I just recently embraced the term atheist publicly within the last year. But I've been gone from the United Methodist Church. I was ordained in the United Methodist Church in 1998. In my lifetime, I was appointed to pastor about 6 churches. And then in about 2000, the year 2000, I started to openly question whether or not I wanted to continue with the United Methodist Church, and took a short leave of absence. And then by 2003, I procedurally withdrew from the United Methodist Church and returned my credential, or in other words, returned my order. So I was ordained in 98, but I answered a call in 92. So when I say that I'm an atheist now, I would say that really that journey began in, a long time ago, but it officially began in about 2000, in the year 2000. So,
well, all three of you are graduates of the Clergy Project, and that's designed to help clergy, active, former, who no longer hold supernatural beliefs. And according to the Clergy Project, there are more than 390 members, and it helps folks to tell their families, look for new careers, and how to live as a non-believer, especially when those you love and care about are still steeped in the religious tradition and practicing the religious tradition that you distance yourself from and leave to become an atheist. So let me go back to Teresa, because I was there when you broke the news. It was a national news story when you came out. I thought your name was Lynn. Tell us what happened.
I had been questioning for some time and didn't realize that that's exactly what was happening. But within about a year and a half time frame from today, those questions really started to escalate. And by the time the American Atheist National Convention occurred, I knew I was an atheist. I knew I didn't believe, and had become a part of the Clergy Project some months before that, in order to do just what you said, to try to find a way out, to try to deal with the daily stresses, and how to manage it with my family, my husband who's still a Christian, just to work through all those processes. I attended the Reason Rally and the National Convention just almost accidentally, basically not wanting to miss the Reason Rally because I felt like it would be this moment that you needed to experience, and I needed to experience it even if I was going up there incognito. Through a strange set of circumstances, I was invited to go up on stage after the Clergy Project panel and share my story. While I was up there, had my notes. Everything was prepared. I was going to tell exactly what I was going through, and looked out on the crowd of about 1,200 people and realized that these were people just like me with the same family struggles, the same joys, the same longings and desires and dreams, and was just overcome with particularly my Baptist fundamentalist upbringing, and apologized, came out publicly and apologized for the way that I had treated people, especially atheists, in my past. And, the rest, I guess, is history. The Internet picked it up, and that was all she wrote.
and as somebody, I was actually off to the side because I think I was supposed to do a presentation after you. And forgive me, but you like the amount of love and hugging and crying and all of that. I mean, you just like, it was really hard to come up after you. Just letting you know, putting that out there.
I'm so sorry. I didn't do that intentionally. I promise. I know what it's like to follow something. You always want to make sure in the program you have the ability to say, no, I don't want to follow Jamila. No.
Oh, no. I'm just allowed. But on the one, so pretty much it's fair to say, I think, Teresa, that you got the warmest, lovingest reception that one could hope to get in such a circumstance. And I wonder, I know, Annalise, that you wrote about dealing with your family over this particular holiday when that A word, atheist, came up.
Right.
Can you share? I know yours is radically different from what we got from Teresa, but I think there are a few similarities in as much as, admitting who you are in a group of people who know you well or
not.
By
saying that word out loud, yes. That tends to get a reaction and often in very violent terms, which is what I was writing about on Free Thought blogs just this past week. My process was very gradual because, like I said, I procedurally left the church in 2003 and even openly questioning and even saying I don't believe anymore in the atonement theory. I don't believe that Jesus died to save people's sins, or I don't even believe we have sin to be saved from. Those kinds of things I was saying 10 years ago. However, yes, since I have begun to embrace and use the term atheist, that has been a different story. this past Thanksgiving, I had a situation with my family where one of my relatives heard me say that and went ballistic, even to the point of threatening me with bodily harm. So that's one side of it. And the other side is just in public, I'm a black woman, when I use the word atheist in front of in community, in the midst of black community, I am often perceived as a, social deviant. Oh, you don't believe anything, or oh, you have no morals. These kinds of, I guess you could say, accusations are often hurled at black folk who declare themselves atheists in a group of other black folk. Because being black and being Christian are so intricately tied together. And a lot of black, when I say black, African American, but that includes others too. So a lot of blacks don't see how you could reject a belief in God and still be black, and still be culturally black, because being Christian often tied up that. And it's even worse for women when women do it. The research from the Pew group, rather, they will bear that out, that black women and their experience with being atheist is often far worse. So, yeah, I have the ups and the downs of it. There are times when I say it, and I say it out loud, and I say it proud, and move on, and there's really, there's nothing, or nobody says anything about it. But then there are times when it's not, and when it comes from my family, that's particularly hard to deal with. Because you want your family to be like, okay, even if they say, okay, that's your thing. Come on over here and let's eat this turkey or whatever. Let's dig into this sweet potato pie or whatever. But when then, the words I got from one of the members of my family was, you're going to suffer. You're an idiot. You're so smart. You're stupid. Those were the kinds of things I heard this week, and they were very painful. And when I asked and mentioned it to someone else another family member who was in the room a day or so later, the response was, well, I didn't hear that. That didn't happen. He wasn't violent. He was showing his concern for you. So, one of the things that I said, and even in this blog, is, folks, people like that, nominal Christians. So that's what that person was who was hurling these insults at me. Take a look at yourself, because, does it make it okay to become violent when you hear that someone is atheist? What gives anybody the right to do that?
I want to bring you, Jeff, into the conversation here, because I come from a family with a strong Southern Baptist tradition, and I don't know your story in as much as how it was for you to come out, and what was the reaction. How did you tell people?
It's interesting. I came around to the belief system where I am about 3 years ago, but I didn't have the conversations with family until the past year. And I had some conversations with my wife's family first, because we were going back to Texas. I live in Denver, Colorado now, where I go to school, and we were going back to Texas for Christmas. And we communicated that we weren't too comfortable being in the church setting for certain services, and that unleashed family members calling, and I had an hour-long conversation with one who questioned whether I had any morals or values anymore, attacking me for the belief system. And you could hear the shame and the fear that comes from that kind of atonement theology belief system coming through the line. And I had a conversation with my folks this summer as I began to get out and try to do some speaking and writing and things. I felt like I owed it to them to have that conversation. And
Forgive me. Forgive me, Jeff. I'm so sorry. I'm up against my news break. We're going to be right back. I'm talking with members of the Clergy Project, Annalise Fonza, Teresa MacBain, and Jeff Satterwhite. We're going to take this quick news break and come back and hear about how Jeff Satterwhite was able to inform his family he was no longer religious and was leaving the church. Be right back. Welcome back to the Sex, Politics, and Religion Hour, SPAR with Jamila. I'm Jamila Bey, and this is a 1-hour episode in which I'm talking with members of the Clergy Project, an organization that's devoted to helping former clergy, active clergy, who no longer hold supernatural beliefs. 3 participants in the Clergy Project are with me during the show, and just before the news, Jeff Satterwhite of Denver, Colorado, was explaining his particular journey from believer to atheist and how his family found out. So forgive me for that news break, Jeff, you were saying?
Yes, I had a conversation with my folks back this summer and basically shared that I was now an atheist and didn't believe in God and didn't believe what I used to believe and had moved out of that. And there was just a reactiveness of shame, and we don't want to know this about you. Essentially, we'd rather be dead or gone than know this about you to some extent. And it was just extremely painful. And to have that rejection from the people that have been the closest to you and to have it tied into your career and everything that you've been about. And one way that I said to them was, I haven't changed my seeking of truth, my seeking of knowledge. I've just come to a place where I understood that my assumptions that I had before, that I based my conclusions on, were not true. And so my conclusions have changed. But that didn't make it any easier. It's such an emotional stance with evangelical Christians, and their self-esteem and their self-worth is so wrapped up in that atonement formula of God's acceptance and the authority of God, and you can't question anything. And it's just really painful to see family members embrace that more than they can embrace their own family in that situation.
When you talk about that rejection and the people who you expect to accept you, you are part of them, and that casting you out because you don't think as they do. I want everybody to join in. You folks have dealt with this, and you've probably even seen it when you were the pastors. You know, did anybody ever come to any of you and say, my kid doesn't believe in the church, what do I do? How can I accept them or whatever?
Never had. This is Annalise. I've never had that conversation. I never had that in all my years of pastoring. Never, ever been in a conversation. Actually, I don't ever remember being in a conversation with an atheist.
That you knew of.
That I knew of, right. And back then, maybe I was just off on my own, in my own world, in my own worldview. But, yeah, I don't ever remember that.
Do you, Teresa, ever remember somebody coming to you about being fearful for the mortal soul of someone, one of their children or close family members or something?
Yeah, actually I do. I for a number of years, I was raised Baptist. My father's, who's passed recently, was a Baptist minister. And my initial foray into ministry was in music because that was what I was allowed to do as a woman. And I was also a teacher. And I would have people that would come to me, and their children were going. Several times I've had people come to me, and their kids were doing exactly as you said. My child isn't responding, doesn't want to come to church, hanging out with the wrong kids, not wanting to read the Bible or study, and even a couple of times my child has said they're agnostic. And every single time the questions in my mind are, how do I answer this? And the answer is always, well, we need to pray. Sometimes we pray and fast for the child, and we beg God, and we try to talk to them, and I've read scriptures to them and shared the truth with them and seen just this glazed over look in their eyes and on their faces. And, I can honestly say that I was not ever successful in reconverting anybody. Now I know why. I know exactly why. But, yeah, it's as a pastor, that was one of those really, really hard things because, and as a minister, you're trained and everything about the Christian faith is just about that. This person needs to be saved from eternal damnation. The atonement theory that we've all been talking about, and I know you all understand it quite well. That's our 100% mission. Go into all the world and make disciples, baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That's it. So to have somebody come and say, my child doesn't believe, and have to counsel that person, and for me personally, see no results from it, just very heart-wrenching.
When you look back to when you were most steeped in your belief, when you were most fervent and passionate about your own faith, and you believed that your calling was to help others through bringing them into the fold and sharing with them the Bible and whatnot. When you look at that part of your life and you look at today, what is the difference? And I don't mean to say that as if now that you are no longer, now you're no longer people of faith, that you're fervently trying to convert anybody and take their faith away and tell them to tear down the Christmas tree, damn it. That myth is one that I really wish would go away, because I don't believe, and I have reason to believe that it's true, that nobody is trying to convert anybody into not being a believer anymore. But I do want to find out, what do you think is the difference in you as a person then and you as a person now? I want you to tell me first, Jeff.
I'll tell you the central difference. When I was little, let me give you just a quick little story. I had a detective club. We were elementary students, and we went around and did all sorts of stuff, read Hardy Boys, and logic and reason and evidence were really important in my life, but it was compartmentalized. It was only in parts of my life, and then the religious part was all about faith. It was about the authority of the Bible. It was about being saved and having other. And so there was this barrier, a double standard about the way that I knew the world. And that's what's different about me now, is that I've allowed logic and reason and evidence to come over into other parts of my life and to be something that matters in every part, including the religious part, including the experiences that I have and the traditions that I do. So.
How about you, Dr. Fonza? What's the difference then to now?
Well, I don't see such a big difference, because religion, the idea of a supernatural God, the story of a savior God, was for me a vehicle to liberation, as it is for many black folk. So even as I became really aware of my involvement with God, religion, and that really was encouraged and inspired. I was in law school in 1992, so I left law school to pursue this call, which was all-encompassing for me. So I was on this search and this journey really for myself. And so when in 2000 and 2003, I really saw what I was doing in terms of questioning, openly questioning, again, what do I believe, my whole belief system. I saw that as an act, continuing the liberating journey that I was already on. And also I saw it as quite compatible with the way that I have seen black folk use religion as a tool for liberation. So I really didn't see a big problem with what I was doing at all. I'm like, hey, this is about me gaining some understanding about who I am, what's my relationship with the world and the people around me, and anything else for that matter, like, say, some kind of death or afterlife. So I thought it's a continuation of what I was already going through. Yeah.
Teresa?
Mm-hmm. I would echo what Jeff said, that my life now, those questioning parts, those just absolutely curiously, intellectually curious parts, they're no longer compartmentalized. It's more integrated. And as I've only been out for a few months now, 8 months, it is continuing that integration as I continue to study. But for me, I think the biggest thing is that I've lost that continual battle of feeling guilt and shame. You know, as a Christian believer, the ultimate thing you want to do is be pleasing to God, and the thing you want to avoid is sin. Well, you can't avoid, I couldn't avoid doing things wrong every single day. And so I was in this continual cycle of failing miserably, failing minusculely, and having to go to prayer and seeking God and trying to find forgiveness, you know, to deal with the guilt in my life. And I don't have that now. I understand things from a human perspective, not from a desire for a deity somewhere out there to come and rescue me from my horrible sinful condition.
If you folks will humor me for just a moment, there are a couple questions that I've always wanted to ask, and I have not had the opportunity until now. So I'm just going to throw out a few things. Now, a lot about your life, of course, would change. And when you talk about this compartmentalization, and you've had these intellectually curious parts, and now they can encompass all of you. You don't have to suspend belief or you don't have to suspend reason, rather, when thinking about your life and the way you live it. I wonder what that does to your relationships, particularly dating, mating, being in a marriage. What does leaving faith do to that? Who wants to jump in first?
Well, I'm laughing.
Question. I don't hear any of us.
We're all laughing about this. But dating, and I'm single, but dating has been very interesting, you know, because I've had to make a decision about whether I would date a believer, all right? Because I think that being a believer requires a certain amount of acquiescence and a certain amount of, like you said, suspension of reason. And frankly, I don't want to be involved with a man who is not using his mind critically. So then that's bigger than just religion, right? Mm-hmm. So, and on the flip side of that, it's interesting. At one point I went on Match.com, and it was and it was when I was just, again, embracing this term. And the great thing about these online dating things, there are a lot of not so great things, but one of the great things, I think, is that you have the opportunity to say what, you know, put it out there, say what you want. You have the opportunity to put your profile together. And out of all the men who poked me, winked at me, did all these things to me online, only one was a humanist. There were times when I would say, did you, after I get an email, and I said, did you by chance check out my profile there? I said that he has to either be agnostic or atheist, at the least. And the responses that I usually got were violent. You be, blah, 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 other choice words. Well, I don't care what you believe. I don't care how you think. And then some who would just flat sell out their God. I don't really believe that much.
Well, you are incredibly good looking. That is probably a part of it.
But it's like, what, dude? What are you doing? You can't be committed to your God. Do you really think that I would be interested in you? So there's been all of that, and I still actually leave room. I leave a little room, especially for a man who says he's open and demonstrates that he's open to, questioning, even if he is a believer, and we're just not talking about Christianity. So, that covers the gamut with Buddhism, with the, Islam, with all forms. So very interesting. I do leave room for the person who demonstrates that he's willing to think, and that's what's important to me.
Married gentleman, care to weigh in?
We have, my wife and I have had quite a journey. We met on a youth trip, choir exchange in Texas, and we both went from fundamentalist Christians to now the secular humanists now, and it's been just the honesty between us. And she actually went to seminary with me at the same time, and I think opening up the ability to look at the Bible and interpretation and all that has given me a gift of us having a journey together in it, which a lot of folks in the Clergy Project don't get. I'm very fortunate in that sense to have a partner that's made it through all that with me. And we have a few friends that were in the liberal church here in Denver with us that have kind of gotten out as well, and that's been very helpful. I've been very fortunate to have that kind of honest relationship with my spouse, that we could talk through it and think together and ask questions together and figure out a way through.
Wonderful. I need to go to a quick news break at this moment. We're talking with folks who are members of the Clergy Project, helping former clergy to come into the light of reason and admit that they are atheists. I'll be right back. Welcome back to SPAR with Jamila. This is the Sex, Politics, and Religion Hour. We're talking a lot of religion this hour. I've got a trio with me, all of them members of the Clergy Project, an organization that helps clergy to come into lives of reason and how to tell the family and everybody else that they're no longer believers. I have a tremendous trio with me, former clergy themselves, members of the Clergy Project. I have Dr. Annalise Fonza out of Atlanta, Jeff Satterwhite out of Denver, Colorado. We just heard from him, and Teresa MacBain, who's in New Jersey. And Teresa, now we're talking about the relationship after coming out question, and your husband is still Christian, yes?
Yes, that's correct.
Friction?
Sometimes. At first it was much more difficult, but now we've come to this place where we, I don't want to say coexist because that seems like we ignore each other. You know, we've been married 26 years now, and he's retired military. He's a police officer now. We have been through a lot of difficult things together, and one of the hallmarks of our relationship is that we kind of hit things head on. So, there are certain things that I know I don't need to push because, frankly, I'm not interested in converting him at all. That a person's belief structure is something they need to think for themselves and study and discover for themselves. And he is not interested in reconverting me. He probably wishes it would happen, but wouldn't be a good Christian if he didn't. But we don't pressure each other in those ways. Well, and sometimes he asks questions, and sometimes I do. But we try to respect each other where we are.
That sounds like just good marriage.
That sounds like love, right?
General. Yeah.
That sounds like love.
Oh, boy. Love. Let's talk about love for a minute. That is a word that comes up so often. I attend a bunch of these events. Teresa, you've jumped right into the frying pan. You've joined with American Atheists, the country's largest organization devoted to separation of church and state issues. So you go to a bunch of these events, and every time I go to one, I'm overwhelmed with how embracing they are, literally in a lot of cases. Atheists seem to be a really loving group of people when they get together in large numbers, and I think that surprises most people. Did that surprise any of you if you've had the opportunity? I know you were all three at the Freedom from Religion Foundation convention up in Portland. Was that a huggy, lovey kind of group?
Yes, I'll jump in first. FFRF, the Freedom from Religion Foundation Conference, was just like every place that I have been over the last 7 months or so. It's like old friends getting back together for a reunion. Whether you just know them through Facebook or you're just meeting for the first time, it's how are you doing, how's your family, and definitely, as you said, Jamila, hugging. More hugging than I've ever experienced, I think, in any organized group in my life. But just so surprising to me. because I think, I don't think I shared it here, but before the American Atheist Convention, I hadn't met any atheists that I knew of, and wasn't aware that they were so warm and caring. Now I know.
I actually did not make it to the FFRF convention, but I was at the Atheist Alliance convention at Labor Day in Denver, and that was extremely warm, and the reception from folks. And, some of the local groups, you find that as well. I'm in the secular parents meetup of Denver and Boulder, and have found friends and that kind of love among parents and support here, as well as the Denver Atheist Meetup and other groups at the local level, as well as the conventions that I've been to. It's great to see that kind of support. And, churches have the monopoly on kind of that social structure of our society of providing some of those needs, and we're making inroads on that with the love that humanists are offering each other in local and in national gatherings.
I can personally vouch for the fact that, Jeff Satterwhite, you are in the top 3 hug givers I have ever experienced. Like, seriously, hug this man. The next time you see him, you will not regret it. So, Annalise, for just a moment, I do want to talk about our similarity in culture. The black church, despite the differences in theology and whatever, most of them in the U.S. are very culturally similar. You have a lot of women, you have a lot of children. They do tend to be places where there's a lot of acceptance, at least on the face of it. There's a lot of literal embracing, at least on the face of it. I wonder if you have had the experience that I personally have of finding that even coming from that very close background and then experiencing circles of atheists and humanists and whatnot, what do you think the love levels are like in a comparison?
Oh, good question, and I'm glad you tied it in with that. Because let me say, United Methodism is primarily white. So most of the churches and or most of the gatherings that I attended as a pastor in the United Methodist Church were white. I pastored a 2-point charge once, and that means I had 2 churches, small churches at one time, and those were both black. They were a part of the former segregated organization of the what became the United Methodist Church in 1968. So, yes, what I experienced in ministry as a vocation was warm, especially when I was pastoring and in settings that were predominantly African American. What I experienced in atheism and with going to meetings and whatnot now is also similar to what I experienced being around, white people, predominantly white people who, are part of, that group. So for example, being at the Freedom from Religion Foundation meeting, while it was good, it's wonderful to be in a place where I am not questioned and or targeted because I don't believe. But it doesn't mean that atheism is now the panacea for racism, sexism, heterosexism, all those things. Most people, when they look at me, they think I'm lesbian. Okay.
Why do you say that? Forgive me. You have to you have to explain that, because I can't say because of FCC regulations what actually went through my mind. Why in the blankety blank would someone assume that you're homosexual?
Well, because most people are kind of ignorant to, just shallow-minded in terms of what a lesbian looks like, just like they're shallow-minded as to what an atheist looks like, meaning I have short hair, my hair is cut short, and therefore people associate that with being lesbian or being a feminist, which I'm certainly have a feminist consciousness, but I'm a womanist, which is different. That's another conversation.
But Jeff, you got to get in here, because Dr. Fonza has brought up there are issues of heteronormativity that exist throughout culture, society, Christianity. that can very much make it hard for people who may even be heterosexual to fit into. The church and its feelings about sexuality in terms of heterosexuality and homosexuality, that's your area of research.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate that in my program, I'm in the Joint Doctoral Program in Religious Studies at the University of Denver and Iliff School of Theology, which is a United Methodist school that is extremely liberal, has a lot of different faith traditions, the folks involved there, and they're very welcoming and affirming in the GLBT community. And so I see it from inside the program. Some of my friends who are gay or lesbian or are having different experiences within the churches they're involved in, of how welcoming they are toward the GLBT community or other things. But then I drive back into Texas, and it's a bit of culture shock these days to come back in and just see some of the attitude expressed by family or friends or emails I'm receiving from folks from kind of my former life, and the lack of awareness of that kind of discrimination. And it's just within the culture and the teaching and that kind of formation of the other that comes with evangelical theology. And especially in Southern Baptist circles and other circles, you just see there's so much fear of the concept of impurity or disobedience to God, and there's so much baggage around that there's just this fear of the other. And kind of the level of hostility that you see is generated by whether they see the other as potentially redeemable and savable, or the other as just the enemy that needs to be destroyed. But they're still the other either way. And so it's like this us and them thing, and it's just difficult to get past that emotional boundary. It comes from, when I was in the church, I learned growing up that there was a scripture about the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit being the unforgivable sin or something like that. But really, the unforgivable sin in evangelical Christianity is independent self-worth. When you have a self-worth that's based on your own humanity and difference is okay, it is so threatening to that perspective. And so I think it comes so much into their views of the GLBT community, their views of atheists, the demonizing and the language that's used.
70% of atheists, according to the research, are white. And I think one of the reasons that is the case is not that there are many blacks or many African Americans who couldn't entertain agnosticism or atheism or what have you, but coupled with coming out and being a non-believer, we are also, those persons would also be dealing, again, with the stereotypes, with the assumptions associated with race or gender or what have you. So in other words, and like I was saying earlier, atheism is not the cure-all for all of our society's sins, so to speak, if we can call it that, or ills, that even as atheists and within atheist community, those situations, those thought patterns are still there. And one thing that I think is important is that atheists have a very sober understanding of the dynamics of race, gender, sexuality, class, power, how all those things coming together in the moment that somebody is either willing to say I'm an atheist or not. Very, very important. The political and the personal kinds of implications of being out and in a community that is predominantly white and culturally white too, because an organization can be extremely culturally white. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's only the phenotypical white members who are reinforcing whiteness or racism even, or sexism, or, heterosexism, and on and on and on.
Okay, we've put a lot of things on the table, and we only have just a couple of minutes before we have to part ways and end this wonderful conversation we're having. But I really have this theory, and the research that I've done and the reporting I've done, I don't think that any of you are particularly alone. I think there are other clergy who think as you do, but who may not know about the Clergy Project or may not wish to look for a job in this economy if they say they're leaving their churches. Got any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I can jump in. Even though I'm working at American Atheists, I'm still a board member with the Clergy Project, and I have about 4 things I'd like to say to those clergy persons who are agnostic atheists, struggling, and still in their pulpits. And unlike most pastors, I'm going to say my 4 things pretty quickly, believe it or not. The first thing is don't stop thinking. It's a hard, long process that takes time. Don't get in a rush and do that hard work. You'll thank yourself for it later. 2 is to find support, and that's where the Clergy Project comes in. clergyproject.org. You can go online, get all the information, put an application in, and find a safe, supportive group of like-minded clergy persons that will be there with you through the whole thing. And then I'd like to say, don't be afraid. It's okay to think. It doesn't mean you're less of a person. It doesn't mean that you're evil. It means that you are a human being. And we are all there, and we should be using the minds that we have. And finally, once you've made that decision, take your time and work your plan. Again, there's no timetable for this. We're all unique, and we're all individuals in it. And, if you ever need a friend, you got one in me.
How sweet.
I was just going to jump in and say, speaking to any clergy out there that might be considering your future and what to do with that, I had a very good friend who's an electrical engineer, and he gave an analogy one time of it would be like getting through a part of a career or a career in electrical engineering and coming to find out there is no such thing as electricity. It could be emotionally staggering, and when your income and your livelihood and your meaning in life are so connected to it, it's difficult. But there are costs, as we've talked about, and there are benefits to coming out and being honest and putting that forward. And for me, and I think for those I've talked with who have done it, the benefits outweigh the costs of being honest, of bringing down that compartmentalization and allowing yourself to live your life honestly. And so I just think go to the Clergy Project site and you'll find friends and support there if you're in that place.
Annalise?
Yes. Well, like you said, Jamila, I know there are others like me out there, black women, black men, women and men of all colors questioning their faith, why do they believe what they believe, so on and so forth. And I've said this on my page on the Clergy Project, that I really didn't think, I came to a point where I really didn't think that living an honest life was possible with a belief in God/religion. That where my own journey had led me was to the point where I had to embrace myself, and so much about religion, God teaches people to reject themselves. If you start off with the belief that you are bad from birth, you are already headed in the wrong direction, in my opinion. That's oppressive to our human psyche, our human understanding. So, yes, I would encourage those who are doubting, thinking, willing to question, to follow those thoughts, to go where that leads them, to not be afraid to ask questions and to say out loud that they're not sure about that, because their own humanity is what is at stake. And if you can't be honest about yourself, what good is it within religion? What good is it? What good is it? So I rejected it out of a sense of, this is not practical for me. This hurts me as a black woman. I definitely know there are some, but most of my friends will say, I couldn't do that, Annalise. Mm-hmm. friends from theology school, and I got an MDiv. My friends from seminary, when I was going through it, said, "Wow, I don't think I could do that," and that's very much so tied up in their sense of self and self-esteem, which I would imagine at that moment is low. So I say just keep moving, just keep going with the questions,
In all things we ask questions, and that's kind of what I do for a living, so I feel good about that advice.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to thank you one and all for being with me. I've been talking with Dr. Annalise Fonza. She's an author and speaker based in Atlanta. Teresa MacBain, she is the Public Relations Director for American Atheists, and Jeff Satterwhite, who is a doctoral candidate working on his dissertation. Each of these wonderful guests this hour are members of the Clergy Project, which helped them move from religion to reason. And I thank you one and all for being with me.